Hi, my name is Joseph Alai. Welcome to my channel. And today I want to talk about how to stop sabotaging your manifestations by means of your creative context. So what is a creative context, first of all? And how do we change our creative context so that we can create deliberately what we want to experience rather than not? Well, a creative context is the frame of mind from which we perceive the external world and the frame of mind from which we are centered in how we think about events that are transpiring in the external world. And I want to go into what that actually means, how to change it, how it affects your manifestations, and how to ultimately have a context that you want so that you can get all the things that you want without sabotaging anything. So before we begin, hit the like button. It does something to the algorithm so that those who would not normally be able to see this video will be able to see it. Hit the subscribe and bell icon so that you can stay tuned for future videos on how to manifest anything that you want, create the future of your dreams. And so let's jump right into it then. So creative context, right? I've said this phrase, what does it actually mean? So I have a series of questions for you so that you can kind of get what I'm talking about. So first of all, why did you get into manifesting? What is it that you wanted? So ultimately we get into manifesting because with our physical self, our physical being, we have a very limited potential of power, which means through our physical being alone, it is not easy to change and manipulate the external world. So for me personally, some of my most earliest memories have to do with my powerlessness over my reality. And for most of us, when we're young, we have very limited power. For some, more than others. For me personally, I was very powerless. And so that was a driving force in building up enough pressure for me to start experimenting and figuring out other things besides what I'm taught on how to receive the things that I want. And so the question is, why are you here? What are you trying to achieve? Now, the second question I have for you is, depending on what it is, right? If you're poor, you're probably going to want money. If you are alone, you're probably going to want a partner. If you're unhealthy, you probably want to be healthy. Now, we have a series of beliefs inside of us, right, that dictate the way that we perceive the external world. So that question of what you want, or what is that big thing that you want? Ask yourself, have there been any events in the past that have had a negative outcome as it relates to the thing that you want now? So for me personally, in the past, I've had a long series of negative outcomes in relationships. So whether that means dishonesty, abandonment, anxious attachment, anything those are the things that I can think of as it relates to past experiences, right? So, or money, I used to not have anything. I used to literally have no bank account or negative money in bank accounts. I used to fail continuously on creating business ideas. I couldn't hold a job, things of this nature. Or me and my personal issues that I used to have is like addiction. My past states that I don't have control over certain substances and that I would run to them when I felt a certain type of way. So if I wanted to attain sobriety, the question that I have is, what were the negative events in the past that were examples of what used to happen in the past? So that is the frame from which I want to bring up the creative context, right? So based on those questions, I can give you an answer for what the creative context is. And it runs alongside with belief or expectations. But a creative context is essentially the belief systems that are embedded within you, right? When you are now experiencing something. So say in the past you had a string of bad relationships. Now, in a relationship, you have a set of beliefs that were set inside of you from the past, from those negative patterns. So ultimately now, when you're in a brand new day, a brand new period, a brand new moment that has never happened in your life, a lot of times, or most times, those memories, those expectations of what happened in the past are going to be projected now. So in other words, negative beliefs or positive beliefs become expectations in what you are experiencing now. And that is your creative context. But what about that makes it creative? Why does an expectation or a belief become creative? Well, the subconscious mind's goal is to express itself for whatever is contained in the subconscious mind. And so if you have consistently experienced negative, catastrophic, painful events in the past, then it's very likely that your subconscious mind will constantly try to warn you by giving you thoughts and saying, hey, look, this is what happened in the past. Now you're coming upon a time where this event may happen again. So, or you're in a relationship now, or you're about to receive a bunch of money now. So let me go ahead and shoot you off a bunch of thoughts and memories and fears and doubts so that you can already be prepared for what is about to come. But the problem with this is that your subconscious mind probably isn't aware that you now are dictating the outcomes that are about to place himself in front of you. So it's warning you on all these things, but in your mind, in your imagination, you've created a scene which implies that you have what you want in the perfect manner. So the subconscious mind is non-selective. It's non-selective, which means that whatever you feed into it, right, or whatever you allow into it, it will just be accepted, and then it will start executing commands in this world based on what you have in there. So if you've been tremendously hurt by something in the past, or if you are generally used to something negative unfolding, then that is the content of your subconscious mind, and it will, by definition of the subconscious mind, which is a manifesting machine, will constantly give you thoughts, and it will constantly bring you the outcome that previously existed in your subconscious mind or previously happened in the past. So a creative context is essentially the center of where you are focusing your world. So in a story, for example, if you begin, I'm going to give you a concrete example that's a little bit more down to earth, right? So stories have a context. So if the story begins talking about Joseph was on a bus, and little did he know that that day would be the day that he would learn something that changed his life forever, and that was manifesting, right? So that's the very intro of the story. And then the story goes on, and it says, well, Joseph ended up going to the store that day, and he ended up running into an interesting person, right? So right now already, when I'm about to run into this interesting person, you're probably already thinking like, oh, well, this story has to do with manifesting. So that interesting person is probably going to have something to do with manifesting, right? So, or if I kept going and saying something like, Joseph then went to a market, and he saw a mystical section in the bookstore, and there was a wizard standing right there, right? Again, you would probably think, because of what I said in that very first sentence, Joseph was on a bus, and little did he know that day he was going to realize something that changed his life forever, and that was manifesting, right? Because I stated that, every event that comes to pass in that book or in that story after, you're going to compare to that initial context. It builds up expectation. You're wondering, ooh, is this the event? Or, oh, is that the event that's going to lead to him learning how to manifest? So a context is essentially the key root of what you are expecting the entire time. Now, memories and past experiences act as the context of your life today. So if you in the past had walked up to a girl or a guy and tried to get their phone number and you were shot down, a year later, you could find someone that you're interested in again, and you want to go up and ask for their number, but automatically the context appears like, oh, this person's going to shoot me down. Or, oh, this person's looking at me interestingly, which leads to the idea, oh, this person's going to shoot me down. So your memories of the past act as a context, how you look at everything, right? So, and then one more example would be, if you are starting to be in a relationship, or you're in a relationship, and then you automatically start looking for reasons or reasons that they are leaving you, or they're abandoning you, or they're cheating on you, or they're not being honest with you. If that is what you are seeking, if that's what you are automatically looking for, even if you don't want to be looking for that, then that means that your creative context has a negative memory behind it, or a negative experience behind it. And even though you're not deliberately doing it, your awareness is scanning for reasons why this is going wrong. Now, the problem with that is that whatever you look for, eventually you're going to find it. But in other words, even if it doesn't exist, you will create it. It will exist. You will manifest it to exist. That is the key problem behind this context. The other problem is that it is very uncomfortable, and if we are trying to manifest this thing that we've always wanted, then why is it that we should constantly be looking for the negative? Why should we have this context that is seeking for negative external validation? And all of that will be manifested. Our thoughts, our mind is the creative center to our manifested world. So the things that exist within the field of our awareness will eventually be expressed if they have the capacity to reach our subconscious. And dwelling upon something long enough, it will reach the subconscious. So the context is the center that our human mind automatically always has. That is one of our greatest skills with our awareness, is that whether we realize it or not, there's always a context that we're looking from. But we did not know that this was creative. We did not know that this was going to dictate the events that would come after. This is why we have patterns that repeat themselves over and over and over and over again. And this is, sometimes for me, I wasn't even aware, or I didn't realize that the thought processes that I was having involved the context at all, or that it was negative at all, or that it wasn't normal, or that it was different from everybody else. So we want to make sure that we are thinking from a context which is conducive to receiving our manifestation, so that we don't have to worry about ourself getting in the way. So what context do we want to be looking from, and how do we get there? How do we change something that's in our subconscious mind? So what would you rather have? A context which says, I'm never going to make it. Oh, this person responded weird in an email. I'm pretty sure they're going to reject my business idea. Or, that person hasn't responded or texted back in 5 minutes. That means they're on their way out. Or would you rather have the context of, I'm very successful, everyone's going to want to respond? That 5 minutes is definitely being used for that person to write the most awesome acceptance letter for my business idea. Or that 5 minutes that person, a specific person is taking is them responding like a message because they want to make a good impression on me, right? That would be such a better context, and not only for your peace of mind, but to create that stuff. You want that stuff to be real. You don't want negative stuff to be constantly manifesting in this world. So that's a creative context. That's the one that you would want. I gave you examples of what you wouldn't want. Obviously, I'm sure we've all experienced this. I've experienced it so many times. So the last thing I want to say about a creative context before we get into solutions is that as I said, it's like the center, or where we think from. That means that it's central to every thought. So that means that as long as we have a context somewhere, all of the thoughts that come out of us are going to be surrounding that center. All of them, which means it could be if you're walking into an event and you've had a negative experience in the past, you're just creating thought after thousands and thousands of negative thoughts. So it becomes increasingly important to understand that your creative context should be something of your design rather than something that happened when you were a kid and you didn't realize what was actually happening, or you didn't realize that it wasn't actually catastrophic. So with that said, how do we fix it? So one of the first steps, right, and there's kind of 3 basic steps to changing your creative context, but the first one is analysis. Analysis basically means we have to realize, we have to stop what we're doing when we're starting to feel that we're having negative thoughts, and we have to begin to analyze what is the creative context that we're thinking from. So I already gave you a bunch of examples, but each of those thoughts, if you have a negative thought, like, oh, this person hasn't texted me back, or, oh, this idea is going to fail. That is a symptom of the creative context. That is a symptom of the creative center. And so if we have enough symptoms, we can easily find what the creative context is. So if it's, this person hasn't texted me back, you're worrying about some other girl meeting this guy, or you're worried about your business idea being accepted by other people, whatever it is, you're going to see, in the case of the specific person, then you're probably having some fear of abandonment or some fear of loss. And it's as simple as that. And you look back and say, oh, well, that did happen in the past. I was kind of abandoned a couple times, and that's your creative center right there. It's creative context. It's super simple, super simple. That's the example. If it's with business, maybe you had a bunch of failures in the past. When you start thinking negative, you look back and say, what is my creative context? Did my father tell me that creating a business is difficult? Did my mother tell me that I should be realistic? Did I dump a bunch of money in a business idea and then it failed? So those would be options of a creative context. And we say, okay, obviously I'm fearful of failure in business, right? So those are your creative contexts. And it's very important to stop and analyze. And we may not know this 100% accuracy, right? We may not know the exact wording or the exact event that happened. If you do know the event, then you're solid. That's super easy. Just what happened in the past, that's what you're afraid of. That's your creative context. Now it's time to change it. So if you remember, this is the step 2, which is it's not 100% always going to be applicable, depending on if you can remember something that happened actually. But if you can remember an event which triggered this belief inside of you that now acts as your creative context, you would then revise that memory, change that memory to basically coincide with what you wish to have happened. What if that happened in the past would negate this creative context, would make it so I would never even have this creative context. And so revision is an imaginal act which goes into a memory and modifies it and plays it out in a way that you desire. And it will actually modify any beliefs, any events, anything in the world as it relates to that memory. And it will change it and make it true. So it's essentially changing the past. So this is something that Neville Goddard talked about. When I first came upon it, I stopped reading Neville Goddard because I thought that was complete nonsense. How can you change the past? But what I have learned through the years since then is that there is no past nor future. There's only memories or thoughts of it. And so if the things that are holding the past in place are simply our memories of it. So if we go in and modify the memory, imagine a different memory, it will actually change the world. The world will begin to conform to that in harmony. It will conform to that new image, that new memory. So, and then as a side effect, anything that was a negative consequence of that memory will be wiped out and removed and replaced with the new positive outcome of that memory. And so that includes your creative center. That includes any damage it done on you. It includes any damage on anyone else, or relationships, or objective reality. Everything will fall into place as it relates to that new memory. So that is step 2, is to revise. And the third is to imagine. So you want to, if you found your negative creative context, you want to find the opposite of that. You want to find something which would negate that. So if you have a fear of abandonment, if you have a fear of failing, if you have a fear of loss, any of that stuff, you need to find the opposite phrase, right? So for me, the best way that I have found to understand belief systems or the creative context is that it's a phrase that's just being brought to life in your mind. And you can test this by simply creating a new phrase, writing it down and imagining it as if it was a belief of yours, like I have had tremendous success in relationships, or people in relationships are very loyal. So say I didn't believe those things, then I would want to create those statements and then imagine them or read them or create a subconscious mind injection tape or visualize me telling my best friend that I believe those things. What will happen from there is that you'll impress your subconscious mind with that new scene, and then your subconscious mind, which by nature manifests itself, will start to create that new phrase that you've embedded in it, and you will become a person who believes that. Not only you will believe it, but the world will change to be basically to prove to you the validity of that statement. So if your past experience had been that you were abandoned a lot, and then you create a new phrase like people are loyal and consistent, and I believe that, and you imagine yourself talking to a friend explaining how you're so grateful that everyone in your experience is consistent, remains, and you feel safe with them, then watch how the world begins to change to show that to you. You're not just going to blindly believe it, very likely. Things will begin to happen in an organic way by means of manifestation, so that you then are you actually believe it through experience. And then from there, you have a completely different creative center. So next time you encounter a relationship, or next time you encounter a business opportunity, then you will automatically be thinking from a positive center, looking at events from the point of view as if everything's going to be okay, looking at events from the point of view as if everything is going to work out exactly as it always does, which is a positive way. And so from there, that creative center is a positive creative center, a positive creative context, which will ultimately manifest itself on numbered ways. And that new creative context will start multiplying and multiplying and growing and growing and growing. And then your world will be exactly as you want it to be. So creative context, start looking now in your world. When you start experiencing fearful thoughts, anxious thoughts, doubtful thoughts, go in, identify the creative context, look and see if there's a memory associated with that, revise the memory, and if there is no memory, just create the opposite of that context. And then imagine that you already believe that. Imagine that other people are telling you that you believe that. Write it down. Create a subconscious mind injection tape, whatever it takes, and then watch as your anxiety will be alleviated, your obsessive thoughts will vanish, you'll stop creating things that you don't want to create, you'll stop sabotaging your manifestations, and then ultimately you'll get exactly what you want. So I hope you like this. If you did, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon if you want very broken down techniques and methods and essentials on how to manifest anything that you want in a very systematic, pragmatic, scientific way. Thank you so much for watching.